My name is David McLachlan. I'm a retired Major General from the Australian Army, and I have been the patron of the Korean Veterans Association of Australia now for some years. In my role as patron, I provide support to the organisation and with that some degree of prestige to assist it in its public image throughout the state. We deployed something like 17,000 Australians in the Navy, the Army and the Air Force during the period of the Korean War. Of those, 339 thereabouts were killed and died as a consequence of their service. A further 1,200 were wounded. We had 29 prisoners of war and 43 Australians are still missing in action, presumed dead. We always seek to bring back missing soldiers, particularly those that have been killed in action, and we can find the bodies. But it is a very difficult situation in Korea in that most of those MIAs occurred either in what is now North Korea or indeed in the demilitarised zone. So therefore it is very hard for us to be able to seek those out. But in the event that a body is found and it is Australian, we would do everything we could to have it recovered back to Australia. We initially deployed 2 warships that were serving with Beikoff in Japan. And then we had 77 Squadron, which was also in Japan and was relocated into Korea. And in fact, it was the first of the Commonwealth forces to actually be deployed on operations in Korea. And they supported bombing raids and what have you in the early stages of the war. We initially deployed an infantry battalion, 3 RAR, which was understaffed at that stage, but very quickly came up to strength. And it had 2 very significant battles at Kapyong and Marian Sang. At the height of the war, we had 3 battalions, the 1st, the 2nd, and the 3rd battalions of the Royal Australian Regiment deployed in Korea. We were the second country after the UN resolution behind America to go to Korea. And we stayed there for the 3 years of the Korean War, and then we remained for a further 4 years with people as observers of the truce. They fulfilled the duties of any defending nation in Korea. They deployed on bombing raids. They provided ships at sea to protect and to support operations on land. And the infantry battalions and the army units supported land-based operations. So all of the things that you would expect a defence force to do, Australia did in Korea. I think people forget that the Korean War happened in 1950 to 1953, and we as a nation were still getting over what had happened in the Second World War, and people came back from that. And that was where the focus was on the rehabilitation. The first troops that went to Korea came out of what was the British Commonwealth Occupation Force in Japan. And they were deployed there, and there wasn't much fanfare given to the fact that they'd gone to Korea. People still thought that they were in Japan. As a consequence of that, the Korean War in the minds of Australians at that time was nowhere near as significant as what had happened in the Second World War or indeed the First World War. And very quickly afterwards, around that time, we also got involved in confrontation with Indonesia. And then Vietnam came afterwards. And as a consequence, Korea sort of, by virtue of the fact that we were there for 3 years, even though it was an incredibly important role for Korea, the Australian population had been tired of war, and I think they forgot about what we did in Korea. And what we did in Korea was quite significant, really. I think the Australian War Memorial and institutions like the Shrine of Remembrance in Melbourne and the Korean government have worked with the Australian government and the Defence Force to really let people know just how significant the Australian contribution was to the Korean War. And the appreciation shown, particularly by the Korean government, to our people that served there has been remarkable. We promote everything we can to let people know about our involvement in the Korean War and what it achieved, and the respect that the Koreans have for the Australian contribution. We do that in schools, we do that through RSLs, we do it through exhibitions, and we do it from commemoration. I think the important thing that we've got to remember is that the Korean War was about democracy. And you had the North Koreans coming down with a communist regime, and you had the South Koreans with democracy and the freedom of speech and the freedom of individuals. I think that's the most important message that can come out of our contribution to the Korean War, that we bonded with Korea to make sure that those things continue in life. And the way of life that the Korean children have today and their parents as a result of the contribution made by the Koreans, South Korean Army, Navy and Air Force at that time, and the Allied troops that went to support them. Again, I thank the Korean government for the recognition that they have given to our Korean veterans in the way in which they've honoured them over the years and the way in which they continue to honour them today.